Hi, this is Khush Rawlley from US Impact, US Indo-American Members Political Action Committee. I am here with Karen Cunningham. On Feb 5th, 2019, the City Council approved an ordinance ordering a special charter amendment election to be held on May 4th, 2019. In the year 2018, for 6 months and more, entire committee, the Charter Review Committee, whose president is Karen Cunningham, who is sitting here with us, they all, entire citizens, this committee, they spent time, discussing and going through all the rules and regulations of the prior charter, which are a lot. But out of that, 24 propositions are out there on the ballot in May 4 election. So right now, we are here with her trying to understand what are these propositions about and little more details so citizens can cast an educated vote on all of these. Most of these are to do with housekeeping and updating the rules and regulations based on the state and sometimes federal rules as well. And at least once in 6 years, Charter Review Committee has to be formed in a city to make sure all the rules and regulations are up to the date. And the inputs from the citizen is taken to make sure if any amendments are required at all. So thank you so much for giving us your time, Karen. I know you're busy with presenting this at so many different places. And first of all, I would like to start with our most talked about propositions, A and B, but on the ballot it's F and G.
Correct, because it goes right after the bond.
Yeah, so yeah, it's right after the bond. So we have this time city, then ISD, then bond, and then the last you'll find the charter, which is equally important, so don't miss that. So this one is related to the filing fee, which is $200, or in lieu of the payment of a filing fee, a petition can be signed by no less than 25 qualified voters of the city, or 1/2 of 1% of the total votes received in the city by all candidates for mayor in the most recent mayoral election. It speaks for itself, but at the same time, would you like to give more details as to what went through it and how it came to place?
Sure. So this is one actually that the City Council brought to our attention in April during a work session that we had jointly between Charter Review Commission and the City Council members, and additionally with city staff. And we weren't actually aware at the time of how many cities in Texas and certainly surrounding cities as well actually have a provision for this already in their charter. And so this is something that really just is, we're recommending that it be put in place to ensure that people who file for office have a genuine interest in serving. It's really surprising to know that there are people who actually apply for to run for election for city council who genuinely have no interest in serving. But by being on the ballot, it costs the city money in terms of running an election. And so, and certainly if it pushes into a runoff situation, that costs the city even more money. And just to give citizens an idea of what this looks like, in the event of a runoff election, the one that happened, I believe, in 2016, cost the city $55,000. When I say it cost the city $55,000, that means it costs the residents $55,000.
College tax money.
Absolutely,
Yes.
because it comes from tax funds. And so we just wanted to make sure that when people file for office that they have a genuine interest in actually serving. And whether it be filing paying a $200 fee to apply for office, or if they would choose to rather do a petition, they can do that. It's the 25
Yes.
petition signers or the 1/2 of 1%. And I know that's
the
some
last
really
mayoral
complicated
election.
wording, but that
Yes.
portion, that second portion of it, the 1/2 of 1%, that's required by the state to be included. And if you look at the last mayoral election, that would put us at around 70 to 75 petition signatures that would be required. So
And at least who's filing must have at least those many signatures or those many followers who would support them.
absolutely.
So that definitely defines that they are serious enough to run the election, because we've had people,
Yes.
situation in the past that it was just a name and nothing was, we didn't even see the candidate.
Absolutely. And regarding the candidate filing for city council, I want to clarify the petition requirement is either the $200 or it is a petition of 25 qualified Frisco voters, or 1/2 of 1% of the total votes in the last recent mayoral election, whichever is greater. And so that's where we get to, based on the last mayoral election, that current petition count would be around 70 petition signatures that would be required.
So moving on to the next proposition, which talks about the amount of compensation for the mayor and each council member, and the procedure for reimbursement of actual expenses incurred in performance of the official duties. Now that is the subject, but then that so changes have this has been discussed since quite some time. Instead of being an ordinance, how is it being handled, and how is it, do you want to give a little bit of background?
Yes.
Where is it coming from, and why we do we need this change?
Right. And with this one, City Council, right now, City Council's compensation is defined in an ordinance, and which means that City Council would be required to vote on that themselves. No one on City Council ever wants to have that responsibility of voting for an increase for themselves on compensation. It's just a very uncomfortable topic, and understandably so. Our feeling on that as a commission was that we'd like to see it go into the charter instead. It's not something that changes very frequently, and so because of that, we felt like it made sense for it to be able to be in the charter. And citizens then would be the ones who vote on what that compensation is. Our job in that was to define what the amounts would be. It is a slight increase from where they are currently. And so we're recommending that the mayor's compensation would increase in this process, not only moving it from an ordinance into the charter itself, but also having an increase in the mayor's compensation from $500 a month to $850 a month. And then for city council members, from $350 a month to $700 a month. Clearly, this isn't compensation that anyone would receive in a normal job. It is still a volunteer role, and we recognize that. The purpose of it really is to at least give some level of recognition for the time and service that they provide to our community, the amount of time that they spend serving us. It's ceremonial pay at best, but there's a lot of times that they also incur expenses that they just aren't able to accumulate to report and turn in for reimbursement. An example would be driving around town on a Saturday to the various events that they're going to. They're just not likely to remember to log all their mileage and look for reimbursement for that. So to serve on council, they're really paying out of their pocket for a lot of expenses.
It is
and
a
so we're just
volunteer
looking at doing
position
that.
for the citizens, but at the same time, since it's happening anyways after such a long time, 6 years as a charter,
Yes.
but we had to account for the cost of living anyways, so it had to rise a little bit anyway. So that's a suggestion by
Yes.
the committee, and again, it's out there to vote.
And the compensation has not been changed in well over 10 years. I want to say closer to 15.
Yeah,
So
it was long due.
it is. It's not something that's been moved very often.
With the house prices going up, something else should also grow up.
Well, and you look at the size of the community and who we were 15 years ago, and the size of the community, and the time it spent for our city council members to serve when we were that size, and what it is now at
Very
180,000 residents.
Very
We're just a different city.
Absolutely. So moving on to Proposition 7. City Charter be amended to provide that a vote of 3/4 of the members of City Council rather than 3/4 of the council members present or the 4 votes, whichever is greater, is required to overrule a recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission that a proposed zoning amendment, supplement or change be denied.
Yes.
So it's basically still 3/4, but 3/4 of the present members, or 4 at least, whichever
Correct.
is highest.
Correct.
And I think let us explain. We should explain why this change is requested, so that we're not waiting on everybody's presence and we can still move on.
Right. Well, and this was also because it is overriding a recommendation by Planning and Zoning. City Council feels it's very important to put that threshold very high to make it very difficult for them to override a recommendation because they feel that the process is there for a reason, and they didn't want it to be something that was easily maneuvered around, if you will.
Right. So at least 4 is still, of course, a requirement.
Yes. Yes.
Moving on to the next proposition, which is Proposition I, which talks about the city charter to be amended to clarify that the mayor is entitled to vote on legislative or other matters when a certain percentage of affirmative votes of all the members of the city council is required to pass a measure pursuant to state law, city ordinance or city charter. So when we need a higher percentage, then we should be voting.
That's correct. And honestly, then the charter is stated incorrectly currently. It is not correct in its wording, and with the wording that we're proposing here is actually just to to correctly state what the process is today. And the mayor does. There are times that the mayor has to vote
Has to, because
per,
we have to pass
per
the
state
rule.
law
Exactly.
requirement or to break a tie. There's very specific reasons why he would have to vote. But right now, our wording in our charter does not clearly state that, and we wanted to make that very transparent to our residents. That is something that happens today, and it is something that should happen in these certain circumstances.
Absolutely. So this is a very important point that Karen just touched, that state rules overrule the city rules anyways, because of which this charter review is extremely important at least once in 6 years, so that we update our rules, at least for the state rules, and that's the right thing to do. Coming to next proposition J, which is related to the limitation of terms of the city charter to be amended to remove obsolete transitional provisions that are no longer necessary.
Correct.
I think a little bit of elaboration might be required on this particular one, so that people know which obsolete transitional provisions we're talking about.
Well, and when City Council in 2010 voted to change their terms from 2-year to 3-year terms, and so there was wording that was added to the charter at that time that explained how that transition would occur with certain seats from the 2-year to 3-year terms. Well, that's, we're 9 years past that, so that transitional phase is over, and the wording is just unnecessary to be included in the charter today.
Absolutely. So moving on to proposition K, which talks about charter to be amended to clarify the time for electing the mayor pro tem and deputy mayor pro tem in the event of a runoff election, and to provide that the mayor pro tem or deputy mayor pro tem shall serve in such capacity until a majority of city council votes to elect a new mayor pro tem or deputy mayor pro tem. So especially during the runoff situations, there's a little time in between that, city council is ready to work, but then we are still not sure whom all can vote because
Right.
there's a runoff going on. So this particular proposition is talking about that and handling that. Would you like to explain how it's being handled?
Sure. And again, this is something that when we read the wording, we realized that the wording in the charter today is not an accurate reflection of how the process needs to work or how it is working. We would always wait for a runoff to be completed, a runoff election to be completed before we voted in a mayor pro tem and deputy mayor pro tem, because people who went through the runoff election, we would clearly want to be able to be nominated, should they choose, or should others choose to nominate them for either of those positions. And so this is just to ensure that that election couldn't happen before all of the elections are taken care of, and we have a full city council on board. And it also allows for flexibility for voting for those positions should something happen and someone not be able to fulfill their duties as mayor pro tem or choose not to. Having the ability to elect someone else mid-year
Correct.
into that role would be a possibility with this wording change.
Because technically they'll have to, after the runoff elections, everybody might have to vote again to then have a proper mayor pro tem after the finalized team,
Right.
based on the
Right.
finalized team, right? Okay, so coming to proposition L, which talks about public hearing of budget, and the city charter be amended to provide for the publication of certain notices by means other than the publication in the official newspaper of the city as may be allowed by the state law. So there are official newspapers, but I think we have to walk with time and
Yes.
be, maybe use media more, online, digital communication more. So this deals with that area.
It does.
Would you like to elaborate?
Yes, and there are potential state law changes that could be considered here in the future. We've heard that this is a possibility, and so this was actually just to give our charter some level of flexibility, so that if the state changes the requirement from just having an official newspaper publication, which how many of us actually would subscribe to newspapers today, but there are many other forms of communication that could be utilized much more effectively, probably.
And they're more efficient in terms of
Absolutely.
communicating.
Well, and
anyways.
readership too. More people would probably see it in other forms. But this just gives flexibility so that if the state law changed, that the city could publish in other places besides just the newspaper. And if state law doesn't change, we're still required to post in the newspaper as state law provision currently states.
Absolutely. So the next one is proposition M, which talks about the city charter to be amended to provide that for the adoption of emergency ordinances, the affirmative vote of a majority of the quorum of city council present and eligible to vote is required, rather than affirmative vote of at least 5 council members. So when it's an emergency, it could be a situation that somebody might not be present, in which case we need to go by the majority of the members who are present in the council at that time.
That's exactly
So
right. In the case of emergency, we wouldn't want to not be able to take action as a city just because we couldn't get all the city council members present for an emergency called meeting. If it's an emergency, council needs to be able to act on that as quickly as possible. And people travel for a living, and there's just a lot of vacation. There's so many circumstances that could occur that would impact our ability as a city to act effectively if emergency did occur.
Very true. An emergency could be like hurricane, this, that, tornadoes, whatever.
It could, the gas shortage.
For somebody who can't make it, maybe in person or even on the phone.
Absolutely.
So we need to move faster in emergency situations rather than wait.
Yes.
So coming to the proposition N, which talks about removing the requirement that all ordinances and the resolutions adopted by the City Council be numbered consecutively as adopted, providing that such ordinance and resolutions shall be made available for public inspection rather than placed in a book kept open for inspection, providing that Frisco City Code shall be made available to public rather than furnished in city offices.
Yes.
So this is an obvious one. It's a housekeeping one. But
it is.
Let's see. I mean, of course, it's self-explanatory, but I think you can definitely explain because it's worded. It's like a big proposition that you'll see on the ballot, but it's pretty simple.
We are way past this process. I mean, ordinances kept in a binder, in a book, in the city secretary's office that someone would have to physically come and inspect. It's not even practical, honestly, to even have the ordinances necessarily in sequential order because one ordinance could pass and another one fail. And so the numbers wouldn't be sequential. I mean, you just can't guarantee those things.
You cannot have an empty blank thing for nothing because if we deleted something for some reason, I mean, it's better to have it renumbered. But the beauty of the Constitution is we ask for vote on any little change, and this is again asking you for vote to let us allow doing that, which is kind of obvious, right?
Right. And we still have all of this information available to the public electronically, actually much easier. It's on the city's website. Anyone from anywhere can log in, and if they needed help, they could go to the city, and the city could actually help them pull whatever information they're looking for. But there's not a need for a printed ordinance book numbered sequentially.
It is so easy that with this interview, all the links will be provided to you if you want to yourself browse through it and go into further details. So also, would you like to elaborate on if the paper copy, if somebody really needs a paper copy, will that be available in the offices or any public places?
It is made available, and I believe through the city secretary's office, I'm almost certain the library could assist with that as well. But there are multiple ways that residents could receive a printed copy.
Sounds good. And the versions are maintained in the public offices if somebody wants to go and check and really have a paper copy, and it's sold because you might have to just to pay for the printed cost. That's about it. So now coming to the proposition O, which talks about the amendment to increase the term of appointment for municipal judges from 2 to 4 years, and to remove the requirement that the mayor act in the municipal judge's place in the event of a failure of municipal judge to perform his or her duties.
Correct.
So
we have, so first the term of office. We haven't changed municipal judges in years, and so the fact that has to go through a reappointment process every 2 years is just an administrative burden.
Exactly. It takes, again, tax money.
Exactly.
To do all of that.
And so it was just to simplify the process, and it's not a high transition type role anyway. The other piece, we honestly questioned and whether the mayor even knew that he would be responsible for acting as the municipal judge in the municipal judge's absence, because that's not his role.
Exactly.
So he was fine with us taking this out of there because the municipal judge, there's actually multiple municipal judges, so there's absolutely no need that the mayor would ever need to fill in for a municipal judge. And those roles would honestly not be related. The mayor is a volunteer position. The judge has a very, very specific background in law, and they're just very different roles. So that was just to ensure that the mayor never got put on the...
Anyways, never enacted upon, because of course mayor was never in such a position to be there. And term limits, I think as of now also a lot of other term limits are 3 years anyway. So, getting it far to that and making it, increasing it a little bit. Okay, coming to proposition P, which talks about the city charter to be amended to remove the requirement that the city council, rather than the city manager, evaluate the job performance of city secretary.
Correct. And that has already changed. There was a prior amendment to the charter where the city secretary was pulled out specifically as a position that reported to council, and that position reports to the city manager's office now, or to the city manager. And so when that change occurred, this is just wording that they forgot to take out of the charter. There's absolutely nothing that would change in the process, because the city secretary, because she reports, and is she today, because she reports to the city manager, that's the person who does her performance review anyway.
Exactly.
If this wasn't changed, if the residents voted against this measure, the performance review would still be done by the city manager, because that's the reporting relationship in the job.
So 6 years is already gone that we have had a charter review committee. Earlier one, we had a committee, but it could not go through, right? So it has been quite a few number of years before any changes have happened.
Correct.
Right? So it is a long time for a lot of us to actually follow them now.
That's why there's
and
24.
update, exactly. That's why they are 24. And they make complete sense, as we said, that most of them are housekeeping. Proposition Q. City charter be amended to confirm the state law governing date for regular city elections. Would you like to elaborate on that?
So the state changed the election date several years ago from the second Saturday in May to the first Saturday in May. Our charter is just stated incorrectly, so this would just correct the wording. State law already dictates when our election is. We just want the residents to be able to look into the charter and know that it's correctly stated, be able to reference that document and know that it's accurate.
So one of those things, state law will always overrule any city rules going on.
And this has already happened.
Exactly. So we must vote on it. Yes. Okay. Which is for on the ballot, because we
For
are
the
for
measure,
and against. So we
yes.
need to vote for. So the proposition 4, which is quite similar to the N, which we already discussed. It relates to the city election twice in city's official newspaper, and the requirement that the city publish a comprehensive summary of the report presented by the City Charter Commission in city's official newspaper, and instead require that the city publish the sample ballot and the Charter Review Commission's report in at least one official media of communication designated for cities' notices. So again, using the digital media more than the papers.
Correct. And in addition to that, all of this information is always available on the city's website as well. And so this is just giving us, again, flexibility in where we can publish the information for more residents to actually be able to see it.
Sounds good. Proposition S, it talks about filing for the office. The city charter to be amended to conform to the state law prohibiting municipalities from taking disciplinary action against the employee solely because the employee becomes a candidate for public office. So it allows anybody to exercise their right to run for an office. But would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure, and this is an interesting one. State law changed, and so per state law, an employee of the city, of any city, can apply to run for office. However, even with this wording change is to get us compliant with what's already occurring from a state law requirement. However, just for residents to know, how would that even work? If a city employee ran for office, there's even though they could run, there's rules against their ability to fundraise and to campaign, and it makes it very difficult. And so while there's an ability for them to run, it would be almost improbable that they would be able to, because of the other requirements that are against their ability to effectively run a campaign. And then should a city employee ever be elected into office, they would be required to resign as an employee of the city. They wouldn't be able to serve both as an elected official and as an employee of the city. Right.
Sounds good. That's fair. Proposition T, which talks about the official results and taking of office. So, charter to be amended to provide that election returns shall be presented at a city council meeting in accordance with the Texas Election Code, rather than the city council meeting following the election, and that each newly elected person to the city council shall be inducted into office at the first regular city council meeting following the official canvassing of the election.
Correct. And the official canvassing of the election, the counting of the ballots, it's one thing to do an informal count, but there's a lot more of a process that the city secretary's office has to go through to confirm those ballot counts, to officially deem them as
Winners and
winner, loser, whatever that is. And so It's not practical for it to be worded to state that it would be at the next
Very
council
next
meeting,
one.
because the next council meeting could be the Tuesday
Next day.
following
Yeah.
an election, and that would not give the city secretary's office enough time to canvass to canvass it and to declare the election, the official results of the election.
Correct. And the existing city council meeting should keep on going as is, and should not be interrupted. And this also gives the newcomer good time to ramp up for the council meetings and be prepared for this.
Correct.
Proposition U, scope of recall. The city charter be amended to remove an obsolete provision relating to the appointment of elected city officials by the city council to fill a vacancy. That's an interesting one too.
It was. We're not even sure why this is even in the charter anymore, because or why it was ever in the first place, because there's no elected city position that can be appointed, and so the wording just needs to be removed. There's not a provision for appointing someone on city council at any point.
So nothing can bypass the voting system. So if somebody has to come there, the only way is go to the election, get the votes, and have your own rightfully seat out there in council.
Absolutely.
So this definitely had to be fixed. So proposition V, it talks about the section 613, the city charter to be amended to increase the period of time to 35 days for the city secretary's presentation to city council of a recall petition and initiated petition for a referendum petition.
Correct.
So initially it was 21 days, and a lot of discussion happened on those lines, and this particular one, we actually fell into that, right? And city had to do a lot of work to submit a report within 21 days, which includes the weekends as well.
Correct.
So
correct.
I guess.
And as large as the city is today, the number of petitions that would have to be signed for a petition for initiative, a referendum, or recall, practically the city secretary's office would just need more time. We wouldn't want to pay overtime to the city secretary's office to have them try to count it in a shorter period of time. Again, an unnecessary expense for the citizens of the community.
It's tax money again.
Just allowing that extra time just gives us the ability for them to be able to do their job properly.
Very true.
When you're counting petitions, it's not just counting the signatures. You have to make sure that they're qualified registered voters in the community. And so there's a lengthier process that's required. It would be much easier if you could just count numbers.
Exactly.
It's not that easy.
Yeah, so this is again a process which has to happen, which takes the time, and with the growing city, the way population is growing, it takes even more time. So it's a genuine increase of time which has been asked for, proposition B.
And consistency, to make sure that there's consistency in the language between for initiative, referendum, or recall, to make sure that we have the same language in all three of those areas, which isn't consistent currently, I should say.
Okay. So proposition W talks about the failure of city council to call an election, initiative, or referendum of the city charter to be amended to clarify that petitioning citizen may file an application for a writ of mandamus with the appropriate court to require the discharge of duties imposed on the city council or the city secretary with respect to recall petitions or initiative and referendum petitions, rather than requiring the district judge of Collin County, Texas, to discharge such duties. Yes. So, yeah.
When we reviewed this section, this was something that the city attorney's office pointed out to us, that in reading it, they realized the way that it's worded currently cannot be enforced. The city of Frisco cannot force a district judge to act upon anything. They're separate entities, they're separate bodies, and so a district judge in Collin County wouldn't be the correct course of action. That would not be the correct person to call any type of action on behalf of an election, a call for an election recall or call for an election initiative or referendum. Instead, the correct process legally is for a petitioning citizen to file that application, and I'm going to try a writ of mandamus. I had such a hard time with that.
It's complicated.
With the appropriate court, and so that is the correct legal process that would have to take place anyway.
Exactly.
And so this was just to ensure that our charter has the correct language for our residents to know what that process really is.
It's a lengthy process, but that's the way it has to be followed.
It is.
Proposition X, the city charter to be amended to specify the number of signatures required on a referendum petition. So it seems 30% of the votes casted in the last mayoral election is a requirement, and it has to happen within the 30 days after the final passage of the result. So that's the change, right? You want to elaborate more on that?
This is something that was missing. And so in this section, in the referendum section, it didn't have a petition requirement, a count for the number of petitions that would be required in order to actually have this action take place. And so that had to be defined, and we used the same petition definition that is used in recall or initiative, again, just to make it consistent throughout all three processes.
True. Proposition Y, the city charter to be amended to provide that the words for the measure and against the measure may be included on the form of a ballot used when voting on proposed and referred ordinances, resolutions, or measures in conformance with the state law. So that's a state law we have to follow.
It seems silly, I know. I asked, do we really have to include this? But yes,
actually, when certain things are state laws, I mean, by default, we have
right.
to, just
this is just wording that needs to be added to the charter because it's there are times that it needs to appear on the ballot, and we need to have this language, in the charter for that purpose.
Sounds good. Proposition Z. It talks about the city charter to be amended to provide that the minutes of proceedings of city boards, commissions, and committees shall be made available to city council rather than submitted in written report to city council no more than 3 weeks following each meeting. Again, one of those things. Use digital media and enhance your communications.
Exactly. There's other ways that commissions and committees and boards are communicating with the city council today, and so this just corrects that wording to be more in line with current practice and also just to get us to 2019.
Very true. Proposition AA. It talks about the city council declares annually an official newspaper of general circulation in the city instead of requiring the city council to declare annually one or more official media for the communication of all notices and other matters required by the city charter, city ordinance, or the constitution and the laws of the state of Texas. One of those things is online media, and it could be official, it could be announced twice
Absolutely.
in a year rather than just waiting for another charter.
Right. This is just to give us
So-
flexibility beyond publishing in an official newspaper.
Yes. And then it's more than one media, so you'll have more outlets. Proposition AB, it's non-substantive revisions. The city charter to be added to grant the city council authority to make certain non-substantive revisions to city charter without obtaining separate approval of the voters in charter amendment elections. These are like things like numbering or page numbers or stuff like that.
Currently, yes, and currently in the charter, we found a misspelled word. That right now would have to go into a proposition and have voters vote to correct the spelling of a word. There's a numbering problem in another section where there's A and then 1 and then B. I don't know. It was a weird numbering, but we can't correct that. The city can't correct that without putting it on a ballot and having the voters vote on it today. And so this would allow truly non-substantive revisions. This is not something that gives city council any power whatsoever to change anything of significance. It's truly very basic housekeeping things that we would hate to just put it before the voters to have to change something like a misspelled word.
But that also signifies the importance of your vote. Nothing can change unless you vote.
Yes, it
The
does.
last one, we have reached there. It is AC, which talks about the city charter to be amended to modify the makeup of commission charged with acting as city council during a disaster as defined in section 12.10 and calling the city election for election of a required quorum and to remove the required formation of a committee to appoint such a commission. That's one of those things.
Yes, and this
might
was
rarely happen, but we have to be prepared.
and this was one that we were trying to find a way to not include individuals like the Chamber of Commerce, Board of Trustees, one county judge of Collin County, not Denton County. Frisco is made up of both counties, but to have those individuals act on behalf of the city council to to assemble should there be a need to deal with a major disaster. And so this would simply change it to be just the surviving members of the city council is who would be able to convene and call an election. That's all they would do. It's not to continue to act upon the city's behalf outside of a quorum or anything else. It's just simply to get us back to having a full council. People refer to this as the zombie apocalypse clause. And so should that ever happen, we just want to make sure that we have a provision in place to allow the government to still be able to run.
Absolutely, it was absolutely needed. So these are all the propositions which you will see on the ballot on May 4. This will be the last section. The charter review section is the last section after the city, then ISD, then bond, and then discounts. So please take the time, because the citizens have actually put in a lot of time to review tons of topics which from this huge book of charter, city charter, go over each and everything and to understand what should change and what should not change. And then after that we have come up with these many, which is still 24. But be patient. Legal language can be a little complicated, but once you know it, it's pretty.
In addition to our Commission of Residents, we had a large number of individuals who participated in the meetings with us, including members from the city attorney's office, the city secretary's office, the city manager's office, other department heads. The district judge actually came in at one point. But this was invaluable to us because we needed to know what the history was. There was a lot of research that was provided to us by the city attorney's office on a number of issues that you will find in the propositions. And I think that's really important to know and understand that it wasn't just a group of 11 of us sitting around a room coming up with these things. There's a lot of research.
Comparable studies, the cities, what do other cities do, checking the rules, at what rate the Frisco has grown, so what can it be compared to, and stuff like that, and all the legal language. So it was a proper team effort with all the officials, not just citizens thinking of going with the charter. It definitely took a lot of effort from a lot of people.
Yes.
Okay, so Karen, now we both were part of the charter, but now let's just wear the citizen's hat and see, because sometimes they look at all these legal language with little suspicion as to we don't know what they're trying to say and we don't know what they're trying to change. So is there something that they need to know or they need to be wary about?
There really isn't. It's a very transparent document, and we're trying to make it more so. The reason why there's 24 propositions is because that's how much needs to change. Only the first 2 or 3, maybe, are ones that are just ideas that were come up with, and just best practices or things that we felt would be positive changes to the charter. The rest of them were just necessary changes and wording changes so that when a resident opens up this charter and looks at a document, they can understand and know that it's accurate information that's being presented to them. And so there really isn't anything I can think of that we haven't been just extremely clear and transparent about. I want to mention too, with that, there is a reason why the first 3 or 4 are at the beginning of the charter amendments, and that is to ensure that it didn't get lost further down. We didn't want the petition requirement for filing for office or the council compensation piece to be lost further down in amendments, and residents not see those because they've already read possibly 10 already and just kind of flying through the document. And so those were intentionally placed earlier on the ballot by City Council in an effort to be as transparent as possible with our residents.
And having said that, entire information in the ballot format is also available online. Please go through all of them and please vote. I know it will be lengthy, and especially it's towards the end, but go ahead and please vote. If you have any questions, please visit the links on the website. Thank you. But you have to give that much time. Thank you so much, Karen, for giving us your time. And please, anything else that you want to talk to our viewers, please go ahead.
And probably the only other thing that I want to mention is that the commission, when we were formed, we're all citizens. None of us serve in elected positions currently with the city. We were all part of this to basically spend six months together reviewing a 37-page document together, which is what the charter is. But it's a very important document. It's our city's constitution. And so it's a very important document. And I wanted to mention the committee just so that you will know who your peers are, who your former neighbors and citizens are that were serving on this commission this year. I was served as chairman of the commission, Karen Cunningham, vice chair, Shane Gilmore. The additional members of the commission included Helen Eve Liebman, John Kirby, Jeff Davis, Laxmi Tumala, Lynn Slaney-Silguro, Sean Merrill, Denny Franklin, Randy Archambault, and Khush Rawlley, who happens to be sitting next to me.
So thank you so much for listening to us, and I was absolutely honored to be part of this Charter Review Committee. And please come out and vote. May 4 is the date, 2019. And please take the time to review the constitution of the city and help us update, help city be updated per the laws. And your input is most important, is absolutely crucial. Without that, nothing will change. As everything needs your vote, simple word to a simple period sometimes. So thank you so much for listening to us, and please go out and vote. And if you have any questions, you can, the links will be provided with this interview in the description, and there's entire ballot languages out there on the city's website, and that link will be provided as well. And the charter, the way it's amended, all the details. So, and feel free to question anybody from the committee, and email is provided as well. Or if you know any of the committee members who maybe happen to be your neighbors or whatever, discuss if you have any doubts. And but what most important is, please go out and vote. Thank you so much.